Salutations, everyone. Mr. V here. I have finally infiltrated the Sophie Games YouTube channel. I've made my way in. No, I'm very, very happy to be here. I get to discuss the latest patch 1.1 of Lob, and just from what I've seen, it's looking to be a great one, guys. A lot of answers, a lot of things we've been asking for a long time are going to be fixed, and we have Twig to thank for it. So, Twig, go ahead and introduce yourself, man. I'm glad you're here.
Hi, nice speaking with you. Thanks for helping us go over this patch. I'm with the dev team for Sophie Games, so I've been helping out with some of these new mechanics, and I'm here to kind of explain some of the things we're going to be working on and answer any questions that come up.
Cool. So I've been sort of following the Discord. I know that Leo has been releasing, a couple of things that might be coming with this patch, but now we kind of get to get into the nitty-gritty of the details. So I've prepared 10 questions that I think I want to know, and maybe some of you out there want to know about the new patch. So let's just dive right in with question one. Twig, why do we need a 1.1 patch?
Yeah, so we felt that the formations patch that came out in January put the game in a really solid base, solid core. And this patch, the main objectives and the goals of it are we wanted to really expand the strategic depth, but also provide some improvements to make games go a little faster now that we've added so much more to what you can do with your units.
Awesome. Yeah, versatility, more uses with your units. I think a lot of people have been asking for that. I think the formations was a really, really big step. But when you take big steps like that, there's always a risk that you're going to leave a lot of minor issues, kind of in the dust. So I'm really glad that you guys are coming back and hitting some of that stuff that people have been asking for. Speaking of the big changes, because those are kind of that's what gets headlines, right? That's what we put in the thumbnails of videos. What are some of the big changes in this patch that people are going to notice right away?
Yeah, so the biggest change you're going to notice right away is artillery. So artillery is going to be direct line of sight only. You're no longer going to be able to shoot over your units. It was actually always not a good strategy to do that because you would take a lot of penalties, but a lot of players didn't know that. So we figured instead of letting them get trapped by it, we would just remove that and encourage them to use it the correct way. And then the other thing you're going to notice right away is the game timers works differently. So now when you queue up, you're going to see that there's different time modes. So how that's going to work is essentially every time mode gives you a base amount of time you get to use throughout the game. And every turn you take, it's going to give you a little bit more time so that if you have a game going long, it kind of gives you, sometimes you don't have to rush quite as much. And that's going to pretty much help us. The goal is to encourage games to complete a little bit faster while also giving you enough time on those couple of intense turns that you really need to think you get that extra time.
Okay. Yeah, I really like that. I mean, as simple as the base time for every turn is, and that's kind of what Lob's done since the beginning. It kind of makes some turns feel like they really start to drag, and then other turns you're desperately trying to get all your moves in, especially on those bigger battle modes. I'm doing like an RP campaign with a bunch of players right now, and we're really feeling the effects of the current time system where some battles just are seeming to drag and drag and drag, and then other battles we just can't seem to get enough time no matter what setting we pick. So I really like that this is going to be a more complex, more in-depth time system, but it's going to allow you to have more flexibility with when you need extra time and when you can afford to make your orders more quickly. So yeah, you already kind of beat me to it. I was going to ask, how are these new timers going to work? But you kind of already said that, so I guess I'll change my question. How are turn timers, in your opinion, going to improve the game besides just making it faster? Because faster doesn't always mean better for some people. So how is it going to make the game better?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've noticed that we wanted to address is that some turns you don't have to do much. Like at the beginning of a battle, once you kind of have your army set up and once you're moving, you kind of just have to let your army units move. You don't have to do much. But meanwhile, there's like usually somewhere between like turn 15 and 20, there's a couple critical turns that really swing the battle one way or the other,
Hmm.
and you really want to spend some time thinking those through. So the purpose behind this, it's going to let people skip past the boring parts and but really spend the time they want on the parts that are exciting and engaging.
Hmm.
Um, and it's going to just also encourage a lot of players to speed things up a little bit, so you're not. And so what it allows us to do is really give you more time to think,
Mm.
more time to play the strategy.
Yeah. That was actually something we had talked about before. I don't have it in my list of questions here, but you had mentioned a change with movements. What did you call it? Fast move?
Yeah, so we're also going to be adding some new movement controls to help make some of those early turns happen quickly. Um, so one of those is we'll be adding a fast move order, so you can tell your units to take the fastest path possible. So
Mm.
that means if you have a road, instead of having to drag and like draw and drag the line for your entire army to make them run down a road, all you got to do is select your units, click where you want them to end up, and they're going to follow that road for you. Really speed up those early turns, especially for people that are on mobile, and you have to drag all the lines by hand.
Yeah.
Um,
It did sometimes feel like I was playing like classic Microsoft Paint with some of those early orders and putting them all into column and then getting them all down the road. And I mentioned to you that it really takes away your ability to strategize at the beginning or, in the early onset of the battle because you're so focused about getting every single grenadier down the road and maximizing their movement that you don't have time to zoom out and really focus on the overall strategic effect of that before the timer's already up and you just kind of have to live with that decision. So I think it's cool that, the fast move is available. And if people really want to do everything manually, is that still going to be something they can absolutely do?
Yeah, so you'll still have the standard movement. You can draw your own line. We've also made improvements to the smart curves.
Mm,
So everyone, I think, has seen those loop-de-loops that the units sometimes like to make when you use
yeah.
smart curve. Those have been mostly removed. So now, if you're using smart curve and you click next to your unit, it can't really like turn tight enough to
Right.
get to the spot you're clicking into. Now the unit, it's smart enough to now go, I'm not going to be able to turn that tight, so it just turns in place first.
Okay.
But if you drag the unit, you draw a line, it'll still prevent you from like losing your charge as long as you
Mm.
do the drag order. Or if you click further away where the turn can be made, then the unit will automatically like take that curve for you.
Awesome. Love it. Okay, next question. So I've also been hearing some talk about a new org system. And the org system is the one that's constantly seeming to change and sometimes improve, sometimes in other patches, it's maybe even gone and gotten a little bit worse. So tell me about the org system. Is there anything, has routing been changed? Shattering, that's a new mechanic. Has any of that been altered?
Yeah. So the important thing about the org system to understand the context for the change is that the org system serves as the glue to encourage players to keep their army cohesive
Mm,
and not just like send one unit out in one corner of the map, another unit out in the other corner of the map, and take advantage of the fact that as the player they can see everything going on.
mm,
So the org system is like if you think of it as like that's what encourages players to ball up, and then artillery is the opposite force, which is going to encourage players to spread out so
right.
that they don't get battered down by AOE. So what we've done with the org system, the when we introduced the formations patch, units got all these different shapes. And so
Mm,
what happened was the old radiuses didn't match up to the new shapes of units. So it required a lot of precise micro. You had to have like your units be like 1 pixel off for them to be able to benefit each other. So what we've done was we've expanded the org radius of infantry, and we've also given some units like guards an even bigger radius, so they can affect even a wider area than than the other infantry types. So now you're going to see a lot more dynamicism with the org radius, and it's going to be a lot easier for you to take advantage of those effects without having to be so rigid in your exact lineup of your units. The other thing we've done with that too is that ties into it is we've changed the numbers significantly. So the it's a way easier to get all this org bonuses, but it's about a quarter of as strong as it was before.
Okay.
So previously, it was kind of getting balanced around. It was kind of hard to get, but it was really powerful. And now it's not as powerful, but it's a lot friendlier from a player perspective.
Okay. More accessible, but less rewarding.
Yes,
Okay.
and less uh, units aren't not going to become invincible just because you put them in a ball anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not going to be able to, for example, take like a militia unit and buff it up to the point where it feels like it's a guard.
Okay. Yeah. And speaking of, I'd love to go into what what have been the biggest unit changes, like in unit balance, right? Because every rendition of the game, even going back way to vanilla when there was like 3 unit types, there was always a strongest unit, right? One that seemed to dominate the meta. I think, 8-pounders at one point were the dominant artillery. Light infantry have always been amazing. Grenadiers had their short time in the sun. Now you see a lot of people taking 6-pounders and hussars, and that is their entire artillery/cavalry arm. So just talk about some of those changes that have been made to maybe try to make, units are always going to be strong. Some units are always going to be on top, but maybe to balance out the roster a bit more and make them all usable in their own way.
Yeah, absolutely. So the kind of theme of this patch has been, let's make every unit fill a niche. Let's make every unit have something in the game that it is the best choice for. Even if that thing that it's the best choice for might not be the most impactful or like the meta decision, at least it gives you something to build around. So what we've done is we've taken a look at all the units that were not strong and said, what can this unit do, and what mechanic do we need to change or adjust to make this unit do that mechanic, be able to be good at that thing. So an example of this is like militia. Militia have in some patches they were overpowered, in some patches most patches they just were not takeable at all. So what we've done was we've changed the balance of like the cost of some units. So we made militia cost less than gold, so they're more of a filler unit. But we've also changed some of the mechanics. So this gets into the routing with the org system. So the reason why we changed this org system is so that we could adjust the org system is so that we could adjust the routing, so that we could give a militia a bigger downside for taking them. So now, for example, militia now give you skirmishers. The reason why you didn't want to take militia before is because you didn't get skirmishers.
Right.
So you take this cheap unit and then end up with a less overall firepower, manpower than your opponent, who just took line infantry.
Right.
So now you get militia with the skirmishers with the militia, but when a unit routes now, when a unit is routed, its org radius increases. And the negative org radius now gets a fixed amount. So if I have a militia, it has a smaller org radius than every other infantry unit, but if it gets routed, it increases to the same size of a guard's radius, and it's giving -5 org on top of its normal minus penalty to everything in its circle.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah. So now, if you're spamming them, we've seen this in some test games, people will test and take an army only of militia, and a couple of them start routing, and everything else starts running off the field, and they're a big liability to have in your army now.
That offers some really nice historical flavor, because when you read about battles of this time period, one thing that the generals talk about again and again is they're always worried about the militia, and they're always worried about how reliable they are. Because, yeah, you can bring them in great numbers, and your militia arm is always going to probably be the biggest arm of your army, because you can literally get them from the local area. But the problem is it's like a domino effect. One militia unit starts to run, and a ton will follow, whereas regulars tend to stand their ground. So I think that's going to be really cool in the battle of, yeah, you can opt for numbers, but with the new org system, bringing numbers, well, that just might lead to a bigger rout if you don't handle those men well. And I like that idea of numbers can be a liability for you now because, currently in Lob, it doesn't really feel like having the bigger army is ever a disadvantage. It's always an advantage to be the bigger army. But here, if you have the bigger but less superior army, that org system might punish you a bit harder than if you had a smaller elite core, which I really, really like. Yeah, I'm really excited to see how that works. Like, see massive waves of militia just fleeing in all directions. That's going to be really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we've also changed how, very specifically, when units route, what they actually the behavior is. So in the last patch, I think everyone has experienced having their armies route and then they like run off to the edge of the map and they're kind of like out of the fight, and it's very difficult, even if you have reserves, to collect them. So now how it works in unit routes is that they route for a minimum of 2 turns. So when they get routed, and they're going to be 2 turns. They're no matter what, they're not recovering,
Okay.
and they're giving this negative penalty to everything around them. And the neat thing about the penalty is that one of the things we noticed, and this is why we made these changes, is it's supposed to scale. So a guard unit routing is going to give you more of a penalty than a militia routing. Obviously, that's going to leave a bigger impact when you see the elite units running.
Right.
But in practicality, what was happening is that units were so damaged by the time they ran away that they weren't impacting the things around them. So that's why we now have that flat amount, because something like militia, you thought it would be a penalty, but then they were giving everything a half a percentage point of penalty instead of a 50% penalty.
Right.
So what we now when your units route, they're getting a speed bonus. So they're going to route and they're going to run away and they're going to be faster than what a unit can normally run.
Okay.
And that's going to get them kind of out of the battle and back into your lines to start debuffing your units. And then once those 2 turns pass, they're going to go down to only half the speed of a normal unit running. And they're going to eat up a lot of their stamina in that initial 2 turns, but they won't use any stamina after that.
Okay.
So you won't have like the infantry unit, it routes and then it comes back and it has no stamina left and you can't get it back.
I think that's a really nice mechanic because again, it gives that flavor of in a real battle, if a guy runs away and he's just trying to escape the situation he's currently in, he's going to be faster than a guy that's trying to stay in formation and pursue him. So the idea of making routed units faster, but they're also exhausting themselves because they're just, sprinting away, no care for reserving their energy. Again, like it seems like all of these mechanics, they may not be big and flashy like the formation patch was, but they're going to add a lot more flavor and a lot more consistency, which when you have a consistent way of fighting battles, it allows for more strategy and it allows your tactics to be, less kind of, well, I'm throwing the dice and I hope all my lines don't just break when they hit, this guy's flank. Speaking of which, you mentioned flanking, and that was actually going to be my next question. How is flanking going to work better? Because right now, flanking feels a little bit awkward. Feels like if you don't hit that like pinpoint spot on the sprite, it does nothing. So is that going to be improved at all in the new patch?
Yeah, absolutely. So flanking was kind of in a spot where the formations patch really stretched the existing mechanic and highlighted where it needed to be improved. So, and I think if something right in the current patch where it kind of feels bad on offense and defense. You have a line unit and its corner is sticking out a little too far and it gets collapsed even though it was pretty much in your line, or you thought that you had a dead the right's flank on a unit and then your cavalry hits and it disintegrates. So what is going to work now is that it's going to be a sliding scale where it's not an all or nothing bonus. So how it works is if you hit like the front corner, it's not going to be the same as charging directly in front, and it's not going to be the same as hitting the flank. You're going to get a halfway mark bonus, and then as you go around to the back of the unit, you're going to get all your bonus. Also, every unit is going to get a different flanking bonus stat. So some units are one of the challenges we'll get that we've had with balancing was flanking can get out of control very quickly with the way that it's been, which is just like a 2x multiplier to your charge penetration. So by giving every unit their own stat, it's going to allow us to tune flanking so that units that are meant to be flankers can be really good at being flankers without also making them super good at front charging into infantry.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I like that, because obviously being charged by a quote unquote flanking unit, like let's say a heavy cav, it's not going to have the same effect as getting charged by a light infantry who are light. Yeah, I like that. So we've covered kind of flanking, org, routing. We've talked about the timer system. That all sounds great. But this is the thing that a lot of people have been saying. I even like made this the thumbnail of one of my recent videos. So artillery, counter battery fire has been a thing that's been on a lot of people's minds, at least in the conversations I've been seeing. Artillery seems to be in the weirdest spot out of the three main corps. Infantry, cav, and then arty seems to be, the one that's the least balanced right now. And it seems like there's a lot of arty units that don't really have a place in the current meta. I'm thinking of like horse artillery. So what can you say? Is artillery fixed finally? Is it better now?
Yeah, so with artillery, it's definitely a lot better. So this is what we're doing with artillery. So one of the problems that we as Sophie Games look back along like at the history of multiple patches, there's always one artillery unit that was like better than the others. Like that always one that had the most ammo efficiency or the most damage. And between patches, we noticed that it was kind of like, okay, in this patch is a 6-pounder, and the next patch is an 8-pounder, and the next patch is a 12-pounder, and it's always rotating. So what we've done with artillery, and especially in the formations patch, we've noticed that there was a big like discrepancy between how high elo players and low elo players were using artillery, and there was a lot of ways to use artillery that there was two things. One, there was a lot of mechanical exploits to artillery that were making them very, very strong, and then there was a lot of foot guns for artillery that would lower your damage without you realizing it. So we went through this patch and did two things. One, even out both ends of those spectrums with the mechanics mainly by removing things that created issues, which I'll get into in one moment. And then the other thing that we did in terms of addressing the actual differentiation was to really play into firepower versus mobility as the differentiator between the artillery pieces. So in terms of the mechanics, the first thing that we've done was we've removed overhead fire as a thing that the majority of artillery can do. And the reason for that is historically, it was not a thing that happened. The guns could only shoot in direct line of sight, so you really couldn't shoot over your own units because they didn't have any way of targeting indirectly.
Right. Before you continue, does that also include like, am I still going to be able to shoot over my units if I say have a significant amount of elevation? Like I'm on a large hill with my units, and then I've got my artillery in more of like a valley or fighting for a town. Am I still going to be able to do overhead in that sense?
Yes, if the elevation is extreme. And this is where I would caution players. If the elevation is extreme, you're going to get a massive damage penalty for that. So you can do it if you like really have to, but I would not recommend trying to put your artillery on a big hill. It's going to result in you wasting a lot of ammo to put a lot of lead into the dirt.
So this is like the death. I mean, we've been slowly killing this group of players for a while now, but you could say this is like the death of the hill camper with the 5 12-pounders surrounded by guards.
Yes, it's
Awesome.
There's two things that are 100% dead in this patch, which is camping and horde, taking no artillery in your army. Even some of the most famous no artillery players have given me exasperated claims that they are now forced to take artillery.
Oh, the horror! You can't just play like a Mongol horde in a Napoleonic simulation. Well, okay, so you've removed the overhead fire, which I think a lot of people will agree with. Now, where I think some people might push back, and I'm going to give you the chance to kind of catch them at the pass here. You're also removing the shoot ground order for artillery, and you had kind of been explaining to me before we started the video that was another exploit that just older players were just using to not really use skill, but just to kind of wash away newer players that didn't know about this effect. So do you want to speak on that?
Yeah, so the shoot ground order had a lot of problems with there was a lot of ways you could exploit the mechanics, and I won't get into the specifics for players in case anyone's still playing on the old patch when this is released and don't want to terrorize the ranked queue with this. But there was a lot of ways to get a lot more value and damage out of the artillery than you should have been able to. And some of the experienced players were just using this just to get in like very insane advantages, unbeatable advantages just in terms of artillery damage. And it was preventing us from like doing other balance changes because we had to keep those in mind. So removing the shoot ground order removes the vast majority of those scenarios, not only for artillery but also for infantry. Um, and this ties into us wanting to make the games feel faster. We don't want players to feel like they have to spend time sitting there getting the perfect AoE to hit all the units with every single artillery piece. We just want them to be able to say, "Shoot at that guy over there."
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I was seeing a lot of that where like click, 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 like which ground allows me to hit 3 guys or 4 guys. And, and the historians might, come at me in the comments of this video, but that just doesn't feel Napoleonic. What feels more Napoleonic is, okay, block of soldiers over there. That's my target. Shoot at them. Don't like try to manipulate the ground so that it hits them, but also the 3 regiments behind them. So, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I like that change. Maybe people will think it's over simplifying the game, but it seems to me like it's actually just getting rid of a kind of annoying exploit.
yeah, and that's the main goal behind it. The other thing we've done too, so the challenge that we always have with artillery, and this is kind of part of the nature of the era, which is artillery is so dominant on the battlefield. How do you represent a unit that is extremely dominant in warping of the battlefield without making it get to the point of being unfun? Like,
Mhm.
oh, I have less artillery than my opponent and it's no longer fun. They're camped behind a forest, they're camped on a hill. So, and that is this lets us also increase the damage that artillery can do, but reduce its flexibility, reduce its maneuverability. And that kind of gets into that whole aspect of shoot ground lets us achieve the second thing we tried to do with artillery, which is balance firepower and as a trade-off to maneuverability. And so now the key thing is you no longer can target anywhere, but the AoEs you're going to notice are much larger, but thinner.
Mm.
So if you target a unit, now you're going to have an AoE that goes twice as far as it did before, but it's a very narrow band. So you're
Mm.
going to be able to hit a lot of things in a row. And the other thing is that the AoEs are not going to travel up and down hills anymore.
Mm.
So whatever you're shooting at, you're only
Okay.
going to hit that elevation level, because every elevation level represents about 20 meters, give or take, of
Right.
height.
Okay.
So it's terrain and positioning of your army on the defense is now going to be a much bigger counterplay to artillery, which is now going to have a lot less flexibility of where they can target,
Mhm.
because they're not going to be able to shoot over terrain anymore or over units. They're only going to be direct line of sight. They're going to have a much thinner but longer AoE, and they're
Mhm.
not going to be able to micro target to hit the perfect spot. So you'll be able to
Okay.
really control your approach in order to limit the increased amount of damage that artillery is going to do.
But superior artillery is still going to be a huge advantage if you do have it on the battlefield, because you're going to be both working through this new, more limited scope with artillery. So it's not like having more guns is now a bad thing. It's still good. It's just now you have to work within the confines of what it was historically for a lot of these real life generals. Is that kind of what I'm
Yeah,
hearing?
you're going to have to use them a lot more. You're going to have to think about where you put them a lot more.
Mm,
They're not
okay.
going to be put them in the middle of my army and let them shoot all over the map.
Right.
So we'll actually be redoing map generation, which is a topic we could get into. But we'll actually be redoing map generation to also encourage this. A
Okay.
lot more things to block forests, buildings in small patches, things like this to block lines of sight. So you'll really have to think about like Do I want to put this artillery to shoot to the left? Do I want it to put a shoot to the right? It won't no longer be. It won't be so much of a just put it in front of your infantry.
Right. Okay. And I like that. And it's sounding to me like the AoE damage of artillery is more realistic to being kind of like a bounce damage rather than a splash damage. Because at this time, they're still using mostly, iron shot, maybe canister if you get up close, but they're not really using explosive shells that are going to go out, horizontally across the line. It's going to go down the line. It'll hit the guy, maybe the guy behind him, maybe the guy behind that guy, but it's not going to veer left and right and hit, all over. Whereas you might see that with like more, World War I artillery, World War II style guns.
Yeah, and so what you'll actually there's still some options for that explosive kind of artillery. The mortars can still shoot overhead,
Mhm.
and the howitzers, I mean, they can still shoot overhead, and the light corns at long range can shoot overhead.
Okay.
Um, and so this will give those are the units to take if you want some flexibility in your army.
Mhm.
But the downside is they bring a lot of downsides like short canister range or very weak medium range
Mhm.
damage for the light corns. So they're more of a flavor unit. Like,
Right.
hey, I want my army doesn't really have a lot of heavy artillery. I want a way to go reach out long range,
Right.
or I want a way to do counter battery cost effectively
Right.
versus being like the best unit to take just because it has the biggest AoE.
And it sounds like mixed batteries are going to be encouraged too, right? So, it's not a one size fits all where if I bring 6-pounders, I'm basically covered. Yeah, I'll be outranged maybe if he brings 12s. But now, it's going to encourage players. Well, I might need a little overhead. I might want to try to squeeze in a howitzer. I might want to bring some horse artillery for a quick assault. But I'll also want to, take some of my tried and true 8, 12, and 6-pounders.
Yes. So we are. So we're gonna. let me go briefly through some of the key changes to each of the artillery units and how we made each one individually takeable.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll start with the the light ones. So 4 pound artillery um, now gives you skirmishers when you take it.
Oh,
Um,
really? Oh, that's awesome.
yes.
Cannon
So
that gives you skirms. That's so good.
yeah, so historically, 4 pounders and the smaller guns were like more battalion guns. They were embedded into infantry units more so than they were their own battery. Um, and realistically, like they got skirms just because they needed like that unit needed some love, and
Yeah, it did.
it needed love in a way that was not just make number better. It needed something
Yeah.
different to give you a
Right.
reason to take it.
It's like you've been
Um,
saying, flavor, like that little bit of uniqueness that makes you maybe click a couple of those when you're making your composition.
Exactly. It's now another option to fill out. Hey, I want to take on some more elites. So one of the things that was holding back elite armies was that you got less skirmishers, and skirmishers were so strong that you just couldn't not have them. It made up the loss of the skirmishers counteracted any advantage you got from having elite infantry. So now there's more options here if you want to take more elite. More elite army to get skirmishers in other ways.
Mm.
Take a cheaper, you're taking 4 pounders instead of 8 pounders, for example.
Mm.
So you get the skirmishers. They also can now unlimber instantly. So if you want to use these lighter guns, some of these lighter guns now are going to be able to run up and immediately start shooting. They were having an issue before where they were very short range. So what happened is people would bring them up, take them a whole turn to start firing, and they would already be almost dead by the time they even started,
Right.
like got into the fight.
Mm.
So that's been what's changed with 6 pounders. So 4 pounders got skirmishers and they can unlimber instantly. 6 pounders they can now unlimber instantly, and that makes them a lot more flexible to bring them up for assaults. You can now
Mm.
really protect them, keep them safe, and then the turn you're going to attack, the turn before you're going to attack, you can bring them up and use them as your assault.
Mm.
Which is historically artillery would be used as the front of your assault. They would be the thing that's clearing the way for your
Right.
infantry. And then horse artillery, especially, also got the ability to unlimber instantly. So now you can actually use it with your cavalry. It can actually stop and shoot fast enough to be
Yes.
able to defend itself against cavalry.
Good. I am a Horty fan, and seeing my horse artillery just not being taken in so many games, It was hurting my heart. So I'm really glad to hear that they're getting their own uniqueness. So what does that mean for? We've already covered Licorns, we've covered howitzers. What does that mean for your standard, good old fashioned 8 and 12 pounders?
Yeah, so the 8 pounders and the 12 pounders. So these are like the standard units that everyone starts with these. So they're going to stay more basic, but
Mm-hmm.
just be good numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So the 8 pounder is going to be that middle ground. And what that middle ground really is going to mean is that it's going to be that's going to be the unit, the artillery that you really want as your reserve. Like, I'm going to be able to keep it kind of in the middle of the back, and I can use it in whatever capacity I'm going to be able to need to use it for,
Mm.
whatever comes up dynamically. And then the 12 pounders, they are really going to be adjusted to be really strong firepower, but we're going to get a lot more static, and a lot less able to dynamically react the same way as other artillery are. But the AoE is going to be its best friend, but it's also its biggest liability in terms of placement, because the AoE is going to be so large that you might start hitting your own army with it. It might
Right.
become a problem.
Okay. Wow. So that's that's already a lot. New routing, new org, flanking has been changed. Units have continued to receive more balance, and they'll always require balance. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. Like, these units are always going to require tweaking, basically until the end of time. Artillery feels unique. More options, more flavor. Map generation is being improved. So this sounds really, really great. So I just have a couple more questions, and then I think we'll bow out of here and let people discover the rest for themselves when the patch comes out. But as the person who basically is responsible for this entire patch, which kudos to you, by the way, I don't even want to imagine how much work that is. I'm glad I didn't have to do it. But what's your favorite part of this new patch? What do you think people, or what are you hoping people see and enjoy the most out of what you've created?
So, yeah, I just want to make sure. I just want to reiterate, it's a team effort. There's a team here at Sophie Games. So this whole patch was not me. Especially Leo has been a big help, and he's been
Mm,
active in development, and other team members that do a lot of work behind the scenes are very important. So my favorite thing about this patch, what I'm most excited for, it's now there's going to be 3 maps that are going to be required to be in the ranked queue, which is Plains, Hills, and Tundra.
mm,
So, and then all 3 of these maps are getting a makeover as well.
mm.
So, the idea of being able to make a composition that is specific to a specific kind of map, like Plains, which is
Oh,
what most people are playing on, is going to be
yep,
gone, and it's going to force a lot of. I'm excited to see it forcing a lot of people to make trade-offs about what the army is good at, because they're not going to be good at everything.
right.
And that is and to align with that new map generation, um the objective system is getting another revamp, getting another rework. So players are no longer going to be able to choose where their objectives go, their big
Oh,
objectives. They're going to
dang.
be
Okay.
part of the map generation. So map makers are going to be able to say where the objectives will spawn,
Okay.
and they're going to be able to tie that to terrain. So, for example, on planes, the new objective layouts will be 4 objectives that are more in the center area but spread
Mm,
out with
yep.
more roads between them. And small objectives, are going to be on towns. So now when you take those objectives, it's not going to be in a random field. It's going to be in a town. You can defend that with your skirmishers,
Right.
um, which are becoming. By the way, skirmishers are also getting nerfed in terms of how effective they are at holding buildings and
Right.
forests.
They won't just be able to be an unbreakable wall that you need like a third of your army to go flush out. I love that.
Yeah,
If that's the change, then I think that's great, because skirms, I love skirms, but watching 4 skirms hold off the entire right flank of an army was getting kind of obscene to see game after game.
yeah. So skirmishers are they're getting nerfed, but as you can see, like I've made it, they're now on more units. So you can get
Mm-hmm.
more of them, but they're less defended. They're less defensible. So you can no
Mm-hmm.
longer just use them to go. Hey, I'm going to hold that flank indefinitely. They will trade in the long run well, but if you just sit them there, they're going to get annihilated by an infantry unit walking up.
Mm.
Um, and that's kind of where that map generation is going to play, because these objectives are going to be more centered in defensible terrain, and they're going to be worth a lot more. So your big objectives on most of these maps are going to get moved up to a spot where they're actually can be realistically taken. Um, and they're going to be so the average game lasts about is over by turn 25. Almost every game's over by turn 25. So these objectives are going to get moved up to a spot where you can realistically capture them by turn 25.
Right.
And and you really have to play around the defense of them. And I think that objective system, and now it will be capturing 2 objectives to your opponent's 1, or capturing 3 objectives to, or 2 objectives to opponent's none, or capturing 3 objectives to your opponent's 1, is now enough to start giving ticking victory points.
Okay.
And we've increased. We're increasing the amount that of a penalty that is. So right now you lose 2 points a turn, but it's going to go up to 5 points a turn. So it's going to be very punishing, but not unwinnable.
Right.
So and the objectives now can also be captured by more than 1 unit at a time. So if you have 3, 4 infantry capturing, it's going to speed up that capture time.
Right. Okay. And it's we're still not going back to like the days where capturing an objective was an insta win, are we?
No, in fact, a big objective's value has actually been reduced relative to the small objectives. So they're going to be less. A big objective is now only worth as much as 3 small objectives. So if you have a battle where you get flanked, but you control most of the map, your opponent was sneaky about the big objective, it's not the end of the world. You'll still be in the fight. You're still in the game, as long as you're being proactive. You just can't. If you're sitting there, you're trying to hill camp, you will lose.
Yeah.
And now that's one of the things too why you might want to take militia, to send off a cheap unit to go capture something off in a corner that that is not you don't want to go use your good infantry,
especially if they come with some auxiliary skirmishers to help them out. So it's not the trade-off of, oh, I got to take militia, but now I don't get 2 or 3 extra skirms. I really like that change. I don't know how historically accurate it is for militia units to have their own skirmishers. In fact, I don't think they had those. But I still think for the game's overall health, I think that's a really nice change. Okay, so I'm down to my final question here, which, by the way, thank you so much. This is just awesome to get a sneak peek into what the patch is going to look like and hear it directly from the people behind it. I think people that are fans of bigger game studios wish they got more conversations like this, where it's just a developer being fully transparent about what they're happy about, but also what they're still maybe a little bit trepidatious about with the new patch, what they're still working on. So to wrap it up, how, Twig, do you feel the whole development team is feeling about Lob's current state? Like, are we, is this patch more of a, oh my gosh, the game is terrible, we really need to fix it, or are you just polishing something that's already very, very good?
I feel like we're polishing something that's in a pretty good state. I think that the game has a very solid foundation, and these changes are setting the game up for us to be able to keep it interesting long term, and to be able to even do like small tweaks or do change ups that are going to be interesting without making people feel like they have to relearn the game every couple months. Especially the ranked queue with requiring different maps, and us having the ability to change those and change the meta by changing the maps versus changing the meta by changing units or changing mechanics. I think, especially since most of our maps are community provided, so it's a great way for the community to get involved with what they want to see.
Right.
And I think it'd be, I really look forward to seeing what people would do with some of those new changes.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I have to say I agree in many ways. And like I said before, I'm sure there is going to be, the next issue that people bring up. And I'm sure there are going to be people that mourn the loss of shooting ground or overhead fire or whatever. But I've been in a lot of different gaming communities in my life, And it seems like games start to die when exploits don't get resolved. So when one strategy just becomes the way to win, that's when you see games really start to go down in player numbers, because people just get sick of facing the same strategy over and over. And I'm really glad that Lob is not settling into that and not just allowing Hussars and, 6-pounders to dominate the meta forever. So even if it comes with its own growing pains, I think that's really, really awesome. But Twig, thank you so much for sitting down. Thank you, Sophie Games, for letting me appear on the channel. Love it. Finally, infiltration has begun. But what is kind of your sign off to everybody that might be watching and getting ready to play the new patch?
Just take some time to really experiment with all of the different kinds of units and combinations. A lot more kinds of armies are viable, and you might be surprised with what you're going to find is the most fun to play.
All right, guys. Well, that is it. That be the details on patch 1.1. Of course, feel free to drop your thoughts in the comments below, and I'm sure Leo or anybody else on the development team will be happy. I know Twig will probably be looking at the comments, wanting to give his thoughts on what you guys have to say. But until then, everybody, have a great day. Have a great life. See you on the battlefield.